Hello there, Atheist Junior here, your friend and humble narrator, and I'm back with a new live stream. I know it's been a little while, but I was out of commission for a little bit because my car completely died, and so we had to deal with that, getting a rental car and dealing with the mechanic and buying a new car, used Honda, but I posted a picture of it on my community tab, so if you want to check it out, it's there. Let me know in the chat if the audio is okay, and yeah, we're just gonna jump into it. I'm hoping that my headphones don't die in the middle of the stream, but this isn't going to be that long of a stream. It's not going to be like one of my hour-long Cat Hovind streams, but this guy uses some of the same arguments, so and hello to everybody in the chat. Amy Newman, Professor Flynn, Darren, Brainbug, Unlocked, BL, Gary. Happy to see all of you guys too. Okay, well, let's just get started.
Try to use a clever trick
Oh, he says atheists use a clever trick
in an attempt to avoid the burden of proof. Atheists will say, well, I'm not saying that there is no God, but what I'm saying is I simply lack belief in a God. I haven't been given sufficient evidence yet, so I'm withholding belief. What they do is then they set up their own personal subjective standard of evidence, and they're able to deny any evidence that doesn't meet that personal standard, even if it's not objectively reasonable.
Okay, so I don't think that atheists make up their own definition of evidence, but let's compare Aaron Ra. Let's compare his definition to the one that you can find on Google. So the definition of evidence that Aaron Ra uses is that evidence is a body of objectively verifiable facts that are positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with one available position or hypothesis over any other. It has to be objective because subjective evidence is only evidence to that person, not to me or anyone else. And the definition on Google is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief is or proposition is true or valid. So that seems like those are fairly comparable to me.
And then when you ask them about their position, what they would generally say is that there is no burden of proof on me because I'm...
Okay, we already have one super chat from Jason Metcalf for $20. It says, this will give you a few miles of gas to the new ride. LOL. Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the generosity.
not making any claim. You're the one making the claim that God exists. I'm not saying God doesn't exist. I'm just saying I don't have enough evidence, so you're the one who has to provide me with the evidence. But the reality is that if they are saying that they are withholding belief in God because they don't have enough evidence for the existence of God, then what they are implicitly saying is that it is at least possible for a universe to exist without God. And that itself is a claim which they have to support with evidence, whether they like it or not. But then they'll...
Okay. I don't think what you're saying here is accurate. The burden of proof is useful in a situation where you have two statements that are all-inclusive and mutually exclusive. Saying God exists or no God exists, for example. God exists and it's possible that a universe exists without a God are not mutually exclusive. The burden of proof is required by someone who makes a positive claim, not an implicit claim, even if I grant you that what you're saying is right. And I'm not even sure if atheists are making an implicit claim. The only thing they are saying is that they aren't convinced by the current amount of evidence for a God or gods, or the lack thereof of evidence. Also, saying something is possible isn't exactly a positive claim. Saying it's possible that God exists wouldn't mean you have the burden of proof, only saying he for sure does exist. So this is obviously shifting the burden of proof, which is a fallacy, sir. Your position is not the default position. You weren't born with your religious beliefs. You acquired them from your parents or peers, or you sought out a religion to study it. The default position isn't really atheism either. I'd say it's a sort of indifference or ignorance to religion.
say no, a purely materialistic universe is the default position. But that itself is a subjective claim which we can just outright reject. So there really is only a binary option here. Either a purely materialistic universe is able to exist on its own, or it requires the supernatural, a form of God/creator. So let's look at the scientific evidence and see which of these two positions are best supported. So first of all, we know that the universe has a beginning. Every drop of scientific evidence supports this. We see the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe is running down, and in order for something to run down, it must have started at some point. We also know that the universe is expanding.
Okay, slow down. Slow down, you're gish galloping. So you brought up the second law of thermodynamics. So the definition for the second law from Wikipedia is that not all heat energy can be converted into work in a cyclic process. In more simple terms, that just means that energy dissipates from higher concentrations into lower concentrations until it reaches a state of equilibrium. Now, this happens on the small scale, like if you leave a steaming cup of coffee on your countertop, the heat will eventually dissipate into the room and the liquid will be room temperature. And it happens on the scale of the universe, where the universe itself will eventually experience heat death and it'll be a uniform temperature, which is equilibrium. If that's what you mean by the universe winding down, I guess so, but I don't really think that's a good way to describe the second law because it's very vague. It seems more to me that it's just a setup so you can say, oh, well, if it's winding down, then someone must have wound it up, which is putting the cart before the horse. That's warping the definition of a law of physics in order to make it seem like evidence for your position, which is another fallacy, confirmation bias. And chat, you can keep track of the number of fallacies because I'm going to lose count.
The Hubble telescope confirmed this years ago, and it's expanding from a single point, which means that it can be contracted back to a single point. We also see things like radiation echo, temperature ripples, and also Einstein's theory of relativity, that the universe has a beginning and was not eternal like he thought. Einstein disliked the results so much that he added a fudge factor into his theory to allow for an eternal universe. He later admitted his error as the biggest blunder of my life. So
okay, hold on a second.
in conclusion, we see that all the scientific...
Okay, so you're gish galloping, so I'm gonna go one point at a time. One topic at a time, okay? One topic at a time, and I get equal time. So you said the universe is expanding from a singular point. This is true. Using various measures to establish how far away the galaxies were, Hubble found that their velocity was always proportional to their distance. The ratio of the two became the famous Hubble constant and represents the expansion rate of the universe. And when looking at the radiation emitted by distant stars or galaxies, scientists see emission spectra shifted towards the red end of the electromagnetic spectrum, visible light. The observed wavelengths are longer than expected. Something causes the wavelengths of the radiation to stretch, but rather than an actual change in the wavelength, this phenomenon is something similar to the Doppler effect, which is with sound. They only appear stretched relative to the observer. The further away an object is, the greater the shift. And okay, you said that Einstein said the greatest blunder was removing his fudge factor that said the universe was eternal. That's not exactly true. Einstein added his fudge factor, which was the cosmological constant, and later removed it, which he did regret. That is true. But the cosmological constant is presumably an enigmatic form of matter or energy that acts in opposition to gravity and is considered by many physicists to be equivalent to dark energy, which is the name for whatever it is that is making the expansion rate of the universe increase. But the cosmological constant showed that the universe was expanding and not static. That doesn't necessarily confirm that it had a beginning. We started counting time on human scales at the Big Bang, but cosmologists don't know for sure what happened before the Big Bang, or if there even is a before. And even if I grant you that the universe had a beginning, it's a logical leap to assume that means God exists, and it's another leap to assume your specific biblical God exists. So I think we're at 3 or 4 fallacies now.
Evidence points to the fact that the universe had a beginning, just as the Bible states, and the science is consistent with a Genesis account. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you believe that something just magically exploded out of nothing, well, give me one scientific piece of evidence where any explosion has caused order and not chaos.
And there it is. How did I know that this was coming? Well, I already watched the video, but I wrote my notes before I saw this part. The Big Bang was not an explosion within space, it was an expansion of the fabric of space-time itself. The definition of explosion is a violent and destructive shattering or blowing apart of something as is caused by a bomb. The Big Bang is, simply put, a theory that says the universe as we know it started with an infinitely hot and dense single point that inflated and stretched first at unimaginable speeds and then at a more measurable rate over the next 13.8 billion years to the still expanding cosmos that we know today. It would have been so dense that gravity would have been strong enough to distort the fabric of space-time. So we can't apply the concepts of time that we use on a human scale to the earliest moments of the universe.
You can't, because it's not scientific. Someone might say, well, something else existed prior to the Big Bang, but this belief isn't based on the science. This is a faith-based philosophical attempt to try to replace the God that was required for the Big Bang to occur. The cosmological argument goes like this. The universe had a beginning. Whatever has a beginning has a cause. So what is the cause? If space, time and matter had a beginning, then what created space, time and matter cannot be made of space, time and matter itself, because that did not exist. So the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to be able to create, intelligent, and also personal to be.
Okay. So what you're saying is actually the Kalam cosmological argument, and it's stated as whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause of its existence. And the cosmological or Kalam cosmological argument is as fallacious as your other arguments. It sneaks in its conclusion in its premises, just stating that whatever begins has a cause without demonstrating that, and it assumes that the word cause can mean God without showing that either. So Stephen Hawking wrote in his final book before he died, which was called Brief Answers to Big Questions, "We have finally found something that doesn't have a cause because there was no time for a cause to exist in. For me, this means that there is no possibility of a creator because there is no time for a creator to have existed in." And I could grant you maybe the first part of your argument, but what do you mean it must be intelligent and it must be personal? Personal? Can you demonstrate that? You're just claiming that, and you're assuming, again, that it's your specific biblical God.
Able to choose to create. Does that sound like anyone you know? If you study science deep enough and long enough,
No, it doesn't sound like anyone I know.
it will force you to believe in God.
What? Is this a real quote? Okay.
Atheists might say, well, I don't believe that something came from nothing, but it doesn't matter what they claim to believe. What matters is the implication of their belief, and if you remove God, this is all that you're left with.
I like that a lot. It doesn't matter what they claim to believe. All that matters is the implication of what they believe. That's really good. Okay, we have another super chat from MathWiz742. It says the preliminary evidence for inflationary theory makes a decent case for something preceding the Big Bang. Well, I'd love to hear you elaborate on that. But thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate the generosity.
Desperate attempts to try to redefine nothing as something other than nothing.
It is literally nothing. Of course, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. It is literally nothing. It is literally something nothing. You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
How foolish and desperate people become to try to explain away the existence of God. And some will even try to use metaphysics to say that things can pop into existence out of nothing. But what they don't realise is that actually requires the scientific laws to exist in the first place. That's not nothing. One thing that also points...
Okay, so virtual particles literally do pop into existence constantly. Matter and antimatter particles pop into existence and annihilate each other. I know you're talking about the Big Bang, but it can happen. And if the universe was once the size of one of these antimatter particles or smaller, the Big Bang could have happened in a similar way. quantum mechanics doesn't care about what you find incredulous.
To God's existence is the fine-tuning of the universe. The universe very much appears to have been arranged to allow for intelligent life. And modern physics recognises a set of universal constants, and even the tiniest of changes in one of these constants would not allow life to exist, or even most forms of matter as well. The chance of this universe being fine-tuned like this by accident is estimated at 1 in 10 to the power of 120. That's a lot of zeros. Given that the chance of winning the lotto is 1 in 10 to the power of 9, and atheists say that this happened by coincidence, well, I don't have enough faith to believe in that, sorry. I'm going to need more evidence. The fine-tuning of the universe clearly points to a higher power that deliberately chose this arrangement. One issue for a universe without God is also the fact of DNA and intelligent information.
Okay, so Leophilus says virtual particles don't technically pop, and they're not technically particles. They are merely perturbations in fundamental fields that can be measured and which constantly fluctuate. I'm sure that you're right, but I was just speaking colloquially. But that sounds right to me.
Give me one scientific example of intelligent information not coming from an intelligent mind. Just one example. You can't.
Okay, so I asked my Twitter followers this exact question, and basically everyone said, "What do you mean by information?" This is a really vague, malformed question. So you're right, I can't answer it because it's not a very good question and it doesn't make sense.
Whether looking at the section of a book or computer software, if you have intelligent information and you can trace it back to its source, invariably you come to an intelligent mind. Therefore, when you find information transcribed along the backbone of the DNA molecule in the cell, the most rational inference based on repeated experience is that an intelligence of some form played a role in the origin of this information.
Okay, slow down. Okay, I'm struggling to keep up with your Gish Gallop here. So fine-tuning argument. Also, the big number you said, that number means nothing to me. Creationists come up with these big numbers and say, oh, one protein forming is 1 in a trillion chance. Okay, well, the chances of you guys in the chat watching this live stream is 1 in 10 quadrillion. That doesn't mean anything to me, okay? And the fine-tuning argument, well, earlier in this video, you stated that the universe is expanding, and I assume you agree that the expansion rate is increasing. If the universe is fine-tuned, why is the expansion rate increasing? That doesn't make sense. And also, the Earth's habitable zone, its distance from the sun, where it's not too cold and not too hot, is very large. So the Earth could be closer or farther away by a pretty substantial amount, and it wouldn't matter. That doesn't seem fine-tuned to me. And when you say fine-tuned for life, do you mean fine-tuned for complex multicellular life like humans? Or do you mean fine-tuned for any type of life? Because if the universe is fine-tuned for life, why haven't we seen any sign of life on other planets? I mean, we've seen phosphine gas on Venus, which might be a sign of life there, or life existed at one point. But if the universe was fine-tuned specifically for life to exist, there should be life on a lot more planets, I think.
No one would possibly in their right mind say that Mount Rushmore formed by accident, by the natural elements taking effect upon it. That would be ridiculous. People would laugh at you. But how much more complex is the information contained in our DNA? The late Sir Fred Hoyle, who was Professor of Astronomy at Cambridge University and was not a Christian, illustrated the point this way. Now imagine 10 to the power of 50 blind persons, that's 100,000 billion people standing shoulder to shoulder. They would more than fill our entire planetary system, each with a scrambled Rubik cube, and trying to conceive of the chance of all of them simultaneously arriving at the solved form. You then have the chance of arriving by random shuffling, random variation of just one of the many biopolymers on which life depends. The notion that not only the biopolymers, but the operating program of a living cell could be arrived at by chance in a primordial soup here on Earth is evidently nonsense of a high order.
Okay. So on the question of was Fred Hoyle a Christian or creationist, because I wasn't sure on this, so I emailed Aaron Ra, and he sent me a nice reply. So I'm going to read that now. So he says that Fred Hoyle wasn't a Christian, and he wasn't a creationist in the typical sense. He didn't believe in a particular God, and he didn't hold his positions in defense of doctrine. He didn't believe in the Bible either, but he did argue for an intelligent designer behind the universe, and he did propose a type of creation science opposed to mainstream concepts regarding cosmology and abiogenesis. In addition, he figured that the chance of obtaining the required set of enzymes for even the simplest living cell might be 1 in a million. His assumptions, based on erroneous notions, a basic misunderstanding, and a lack of more recent data, led him to argue that a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with the physics, as well as chemistry and biology, and there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The number one calculates from the facts seems to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. So this man, so often painted as an atheist, confessed his belief in an immortal intellect with inexplicable powers. Hoyle believed in a god, lowercase g, more importantly to demonstrate just how poorly he understood evolution and abiogenesis, which we're going to get to. He also wrote the following criticism of both processes, which he blended into one, the way creationists typically do. A junkyard contains all the bits and pieces of a Boeing 747 dismembered and in disarray. A whirlwind happens to blow through the yard. What is the chance that after its passage, a fully assembled 747 ready to fly will be found standing there, so small as to be negligible, even if a tornado were to blow through enough junkyards to fill the whole universe? Hoyle certainly wasn't your average creationist. He was popularly considered to be an atheist, but he did argue for a supernatural, intelligent designer performing a series of recurrent creation events. He famously objected to Big Bang cosmology, and he was openly hostile to evolution. Hoyle said that Archaeopteryx fossils were forgeries with faked feather impressions fraudulently glued onto a true dinosaur, and that Archaeopteryx was just Cosmognathus dressed up like a bird. So I will put his comment in the comment section if you guys want to read it later. But thank you, Aaron, for helping me with this video.
Can you give me just one example of intelligent information not coming from an intelligent mind? You can't. It's impossible. It's not supported by science. So why would you believe that? We can look around us and see the evidence for the existence of God. It's very plain. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made.
Okay, so God has shown it to them, but it's invisible. And the invisible things have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world. Okay, that doesn't make sense. So we're using the Bible, a Bible verse as evidence.
So they are without excuse. You look at a painting, how do you know a painter was there?
There it is.
Because of the painting. You look at a building and you know that a builder was there. You can look at creation and you can know that a creator was there. It really is that simple and obvious, but people want to deny that. Many proponents of evolution will state that evolution is a fact of science.
Yeah, it's fallacious to say creation requires a creator because you're presupposing that the universe was created by your God.
But this cannot be further from the truth. There are numerous problems with this theory that are at odds with science. Laboratory studies have shown that organisms are capable of adaptation, the ability to shift their biology to fit their environment. These small changes are called microevolution. However, those same studies have shown that this can only go so far. A dog can change to another type of dog, but there's no evidence to suggest that a certain kind of animal can change beyond its own genetic limits and become something else.
What is a kind?
Microevolution turns a wolf into a chihuahua or a Great Dane. This is scientific. Macroevolution turns a fish into a cow. This
No, it fucking doesn't.
This is completely unscientific. Macroevolution
Yeah, you're right. That is a completely unscientific straw man definition of macroevolution. Uh, wow.
has some major scientific impossibilities and hurdles, including irreducible complexity, the lack of transitional fossils, and much more. The reason why macroevolution is unscientific is that there is no known way for entirely new genetic information to be added to a genome as macroevolution requires. Duplications and mutations do not add new information to the genome. Duplications are the result of duplicating existing genetic information, and mutations alter existing genetic information.
Yeah, so that's new information. Every mutation is new information. It's a C turning into an A or a T turning into a G.
Neither of them adds new information. What they really can't account for is the build-up of information. One has not found a single mutation that one can point at that actually adds information. In fact, every beneficial mutation that I have seen reduces the information, it loses information. Give me just one scientific example of an increase in information. You can't, because it's not scientific.
Okay, so I'm going to show a clip from a friend of the channel, Dr. Dan Stern Cardinale, professor at Rutgers of virology. His channel is Creation Myths, and I'm going to add the link to his channel and this video in the description of this video.
If you believe that a universe is possible without...
Oh wait, no, I think I forgot to add the clip, but I'll add the video in a second. I'll add the video link. I'll add the link to the description to his video that debunks this. Does intelligence only come from information? So he did a really great video that debunks this point. I'll link that in the description, but I ran out of time to add that clip before the stream started. Sorry.
God, then you have to believe that life came from non-life. Give me one scientific example, please, just one of life coming from non-life. You can't, because life comes from life 100% of the time. People will point to abiogenesis.
Okay, did God come from life then? Oh no, he just exists. Well, that's special pleading.
The original evolution of life or living organisms from inorganic or inanimate substances. This is an interesting theory in one's mind, but that's all it is, an idea. It cannot be scientifically demonstrated. Others will point to the Miller-Urey experiment, which was a simulation of conditions of the early Earth, testing the idea that life, or more specifically organic molecules, could have formed by nothing more than simple chemical reactions. But the problem is that...
Okay, and on the topic of life only comes from life, you can't have non-life come from life. Well, the chemicals that make up your body, the carbon, the water, the keratin in your hair and fingernails, are they alive? No, but they still make up a living being. Saying life can't come from non-life does not disprove abiogenesis, because all that is the conversion of geochemistry into biochemistry. Also, people can be clinically dead and be brought back to life. So you said that I couldn't give an example. Well, I just did. And the origin of life, it remains very much a mystery, but biochemists have learned about how primitive nucleic acids, amino acids, and other building blocks of life could have formed and organized themselves into self-replicating, self-sustaining units, laying the foundation for cellular biochemistry. Astrochemical analyses hint that the quantities of these compounds might have originated in space and fallen to Earth in comets, a scenario that may solve the problem of how those constituents arose under the conditions that prevailed when our planet was young. And as for the Miller-Urey experiment, while not a perfect representation of the early Earth, proved that biomolecules can form in early Earth-like conditions. It was testing the hypotheses of Oprin and Haldane, which suggested that life arose gradually from inorganic molecules, with building blocks like amino acids forming first and then combining to make complex polymers. It turned the speculation that life may have emerged from chemistry into a legitimate, testable scientific theory. So that's what it accomplished.
This only brought about the rise of organic compounds, not life itself. If this is the best evidence you have, then you are in big, big trouble.
Well, it's a good thing that 60 years has passed since the experiment, even though scientists today still do experiments that use it as a foundation.
Living things coming to life is the stuff of science fiction, not of science. And
so are miracles.
all life had to have come from a source of life, and God is the source of all life. Another problem with the possibility of a universe without God is the rational that we observe around us. Give me one scientific example of the rational coming from the irrational. You can't.
Okay, if you have a chaotic system and you impose upon that system strict rules and you let things play out on their own, you will have order emerge from that chaos. Look at nature and the biodiversity of the animal kingdom, or how crystals grow. Or I don't know, what about somebody who has severe mental health problems, who is totally irrational, but they go to therapy and get the right medication, and then they become rational?
If our brain is restricted
So you said I can't? Well, I just did.
to the physical laws of physics and chemistry, then all that it is one chemical state changing to another. It's determinism. And anything that you say, any argument you put up, I could say to you, your brain made you do that. You're not actually thinking yourself, it's just your chemistry that's controlling you. So what's the point of us even talking?
So I can debunk all the crap that you're saying? There is a point to it. I'm educating people. I'm trying to educate you. It's not working.
And if that's the case, you can't even trust the system that is giving you these thoughts. So as I said, atheists will try to frame
I trust my brain a lot more than I trust you.
a debate in the form that, well, I'm not making any claim, you're making the claim, so you have to support your claim. But like I said, if they're saying that there's even a possibility that there's not enough evidence for God, that a universe could even possibly exist without God, then they have to provide the evidence to show how this is possible from the science available. And looking at all of this, I can see clearly why they would want to shirk the burden of proof.
Okay, well, I can turn this claim right back on you and say, well, you quoted the Bible earlier, so you're implicitly claiming that Buddha does not exist, that Buddha is not God, that Vishnu does not exist, that the Bhagavad Gita is not true. So you have the burden of proof to prove with scientific evidence that Hinduism is not true, that Buddhism is not true, that Satanism is not true, that paganism is wrong, that deism is wrong, that Jainism is wrong, that Zoroastrianism is wrong. You're implicitly claiming that all of those are not true, because when you have one religion, you're atheistic to all the other religions that you don't believe. So I could turn this claim right back on you, bro.
Because they don't have any evidence that can support the possibility even of a universe without God. All the science actually flies in the face of this. Also note that in this video, I'm not talking about evidence for the Christian God, I'm talking about the evidence for a creator God.
I'm sorry, but you don't get to quote the Bible as evidence and then later on say, oh, I'm arguing for a deistic creator God. Don't insult the intelligence of my audience like that, please. They're smarter than that.
Talking about the evidence for who God is would be a topic for another video, and then we could explore things like biblical prophecy, the resurrection, the reliability of biblical accounts. Another thing that
Let's do it, bro. Let's explore biblical prophecy, bro. I'm down. I'll debunk all of it, bro.
atheists will say is that this isn't actually evidence for God, this is just God of the gaps. Because you can't explain things, you're filling in the gaps with God. But this isn't true. This is evidence that actually points to the fact that a supernatural being is required in the explanation of the universe. God has intentionally designed the universe in this way so that it points back to Him and definitively testifies of His existence. This is so unmistakable. One would have to choose to close their eyes and put their fingers in their ears.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else.
Not to see this. The full says in his heart there is no God. And what atheists are actually doing is science of the gap, pseudoscience of the gap. They're saying, well, if we wait long enough, then there will be enough evidence that will be able to explain these things. And many atheists will say, well, I simply don't know. I'm humble enough to say that I don't know. But it's not an issue of saying I don't know. The scientific evidence actually contradicts the position that a universe could even exist without the possibility of God. And many scientists have many things to say on this issue, and they will forcefully try to push the fact that things like evolution are a fact and all of this other nonsense, that something can come from nothing. But nonsense spoken by scientists is still nonsense.
And nonsense spoken by Christian YouTubers is still nonsense. In fact, it's often nonsense.
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I cannot believe in what completely flies in the face of all of the available evidence. Atheists will try to frame this whole debate with this false dichotomy of science versus the unscientific, the intellectual versus the unintellectual, the rational versus the irrational, but that is a false dichotomy. And I'm going to stand on the side of the great scientists like Isaac Newton and Michael Faraday and many other scientists who believed in God.
Isaac Newton also believed in alchemy. Are you going to stand for that?
And even some of them who specifically believed in the Christian God. This isn't a matter of the science versus faith versus the unscientific, the intellectual versus the unintellectual. This is a matter of looking at the evidence and going wherever the evidence points, no matter how uncomfortable that makes you feel. Labeling these things as science, chanting mantras that it's a scientific fact, just like a Buddhist monk, just chanting those mantras doesn't actually make it science. It doesn't make it science any more than me saying that I am the Incredible Hulk, and that's a fact.
Nice meme, bro.
Makes me the Incredible Hulk. It's nonsense. I find when I'm discussing things with atheists, they become very uncomfortable when they are the ones who are having to answer the questions. Give me one example of life coming from non-life. There's not one. There's not one example.
Do you need a glass of water, bro? I mean, you look like you're sweating. Are you okay? I mean, I'm just asking.
Of intelligent information not coming from an intelligent mind, of something coming from nothing, of the rational coming from the irrational. And this just exposes the fact that their position is not based on science, testable, observable, repeatable. It's based on pseudoscience and philosophy so that they can desperately try to avoid the obvious, that is, that God exists. Friends, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to receive notifications.
Yeah. Not on my watch. Okay. So, I am going to take a drink break. Excuse me one moment. Ah, that's refreshing. Okay. Excuse me, Hoven. Hoven. Debunking pseudoscience is hard work, tiring. Okay. Thank you to all the people in the chat for showing up to my stream. I know it's been a while. I apologize for the sort of lack of content recently, but I'm ready to get back at it. I'm ready to keep making content for you guys. I'm excited. I'm pumped up. I'm amped, bro. There's a freaking fly in my room. I apologize for that. Let me know what you thought of this video. Leave a comment below. Like the video. Subscribe to my channel. We are very close to 5,000 subscribers. I'm going to check right now how many subscribers I'm at. So I am at 4,950. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I need 50 more to get to 5,000. Or 4,960. I need 40 more to get to 5,000. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I plan on doing some sort of celebration stream because that's a huge milestone for my channel. The growth has been really exciting, really fast. It's awesome. And, you know, like, subscribe, and comment. All of that engagement helps my channel out. But if you want to support my channel, Past that, in a monetary way, you can send super chats. You can also visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/atheistjr. That's atheistjr. And consider pledging as little as $1 per month. $1 unlocks all of the benefits, which are early access to videos, exclusive videos that you can only see on there where I curse a lot. Exclusive, I do one-on-one live streams with people if they want. You don't have to. And I offer at the higher tiers, I will dress up like Kent Hovind and make a personalized video for you if you want. I have the Hawaiian shirt ready to go. Ready to go. Hovind. I will admit I have been I have gotten some comments recently of people saying don't keep making videos about Kent Hovind. Don't give him a platform. Emma Thorne recently made an excellent video that I helped a little bit with. I helped contribute some clips because the video is Kent Hovind and Matt Powell being awful people. And she asked me, "Do you have any clips of that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have lots of them. I have lots of clips saved in Google Docs, multiple of them." So, yeah, Ian Chen, good luck on your debate with Kent Hovind. That's gonna be. I know he mentioned you in a video recently. I think he called you a pervert or something, or he said you were vulgar. And he's expecting Standing for Truth to like end the debate early. Oh, well, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Don't make me beg you. I'm so close to 5,000. I'm this close. And yeah, thank you for watching the stream. I'll see you guys in the next video.